"Great Spirit of the river," he called out, his voice carrying across the water. "We come before you in humility and fear. We acknowledge our trespass, our ignorance of your claim. We beg your forgiveness and ask that you show mercy to our people." For a long moment there was only silence. Then, with a roar that shook the very ground, the river seemed to rear up, forming a massive wave that towered over the villagers. Women screamed, men fell to their knees, certain that their last moment had come. But instead of crashing down upon them, the wave held its shape, and there, at its crest, stood Adana in all her terrible glory. Her beauty was fearsome now, her eyes glowing with an unearthly light, her hair writhing like snakes around her head. "You dare," she said, her voice booming across the land, "to beg forgiveness now? After your people took what was mine, tempted my husband into betraying our sacred bond." The Dibia prostrated himself in the shallows. "Great One, we did not know. We are but mortals, blind to the ways of spirits. If blood must be shed to appease you, take mine, but spare the innocent, I beg you." Adana's laugh was like thunder. "Your life? What use have I for one measly life when I can take you all?" "Please," a new voice called out. Emika's mother stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Great Spirit, if anyone is to blame, it is I. I pushed my son, unknowing of his commitment to you. Take me, punish me, but let the others live." For the first time, Adana's expression softened slightly. "You would trade your life for theirs, old woman." "I would," Emika's mother said firmly. "I have lived my life. Let the young ones have a chance to live theirs." Adana seemed to consider this for a long moment. Then her gaze fell on Ene, who stood at the front of the crowd, staring up at the river spirit without fear, losing some of its thunderous quality. "You are the one who dreams of me." Ene nodded solemnly. "I see you, great mother of the river. I feel your pain, your anger, but also your loneliness." Something flickered in Adana's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or a hint of vulnerability quickly masked. "And what would you offer me, little dreamer?" "Your life as well." Ene shook her head. "No, great mother, I offer you something else. A choice." Adana's eyebrows rose. "A choice?" "Yes," Ene said. "You can destroy us all, take your revenge, or you can let your heart heal. Accept an offering of respect and honor from our people, not as a husband, but as the great spirit you are." A murmur ran through the crowd. What was this child doing? But the Dibia, rising slowly from his prostrate position, nodded in understanding. "The child speaks wisdom," he said. "Great river spirit, we have wronged you by treating you as a mere woman to be wed, rather than the powerful entity you are. Allow us to make amends. Let us build you a shrine. Make regular offerings. You will be honored as you deserve, your power acknowledged by all." Adana's form seemed to waver, the massive wave flickering like a mirage. For a breathless moment it seemed she might refuse, might bring the full weight of her watery wrath down upon them all. But then, slowly, the wave began to recede. Adana descended until she stood upon the surface of the river, still intimidating but no longer a towering colossus of water. "You offer wisdom beyond your years, little one," she said to Anne. "And you," she addressed the Dibia, "speak with the voice of true understanding." Her gaze swept over the gathered villagers. "I will accept your offer. Honor me as is my due, respect the river and its power, and I will spare your lives. But know this, should you ever forget, should you take me for granted or treat me as less than I am, my vengeance will be swift and terrible." With those words, Adana began to dissolve, her form merging with the river until only her eyes remained, 2 points of light gleaming in the growing darkness. And then, with a final ripple, she was gone. The villagers stood in stunned silence for a long moment before a great cheer went up. They were saved. As the initial euphoria faded, they turned to the serious business of honoring their new arrangement with the river spirit. In the days that followed, the waters receded. Those who had been taken, including Emeka and Olana, were never seen again. But small tokens would sometimes wash up on the shore: a familiar necklace, a carved wooden figure, a child's favorite toy. The villagers took these as signs that their lost loved ones were not forgotten, but had become part of the river itself. True to their word, the people of Umuaka built a grand shrine to Adana on the riverbank. The Dibia led regular ceremonies, offering the finest fish, cleanest palm wine, and most beautiful crafts to the river spirit. Children were taught to respect the water, to never take its bounty for granted. Fishermen would pour libations before casting their nets, thanking Adana for her generosity. As the years passed, Umuaka prospered. The river provided abundant fish, protected the village from flooding, and seemed to bless the crops grown along its banks. Travelers spoke of the village's unusual good fortune, and many came to seek the favor of the powerful river spirit. But the people of Umuaka never forgot the terrible price of Adana's wrath. The tale of Emeka and the river bride was told and retold, a cautionary story passed down through generations. Parents used it to warn their children about the dangers of greed and the importance of keeping one's word. Young men were reminded that beauty could hide great danger and that the spirits were not to be trifled with. Nay, the young girl who had helped broker peace with Adana grew to become a respected figure in the village. Her dreams continued to provide insight into the river spirit's moods and desires, allowing the people to adjust their offerings and behavior accordingly. Under her guidance, the relationship between Umuaka and Adana remained strong. However, as with all things, time brought change. As the world beyond Umuaka modernized, younger generations began to question the old ways. Some scoffed at the idea of a vengeful river spirit, calling it superstition and outdated thinking. Chidi, a young man who had left the village to study in the city, returned with grand plans to develop Umuaka. He spoke of dams to control the river's flow, of factories to process the fish on an industrial scale, of tourists coming to speed across the water on noisy boats. Many of the villagers, especially the younger ones, were excited by Chidi's vision. They saw opportunities for jobs, for wealth, for a life beyond the simple existence of their parents and grandparents. Despite the warnings of the elders and the Dibia, support for Chidi's plans grew. Construction began on the dam, a massive concrete structure that would forever alter the river's course. As the work progressed, strange things began to happen. Workers reported seeing a beautiful woman watching them from the water, her eyes filled with sadness and rage. Equipment malfunctioned inexplicably, and several men nearly drowned in mysterious accidents. Nay, now an old woman herself pleaded with the villagers to stop the construction. Adana's patience wears thin, she warned. If we continue on this path, her vengeance will be terrible. But Chidi and his supporters dismissed her concerns. This is the 21st century, Chidi declared. We can't let old superstitions hold us back from progress. The night before the dam was to be completed, a great storm arose. Rain lashed the village, and the river swelled to heights never before seen. As lightning split the sky, a massive wave rose up, taking the form of a woman, Adana, larger and more terrifying than ever before. Foolish mortals, her voice boomed, shaking the very ground. You dare to chain me, to pollute my waters with your machines. You have forgotten your promises, forsaken the respect you once showed. Now you will remember why I am to be feared. With a gesture, Adana sent the wave crashing down upon the dam. Concrete crumbled like sand, and the river rushed through the breach, sweeping away everything in its path. The villagers fled to higher ground, watching in horror as their homes, their boats, their livelihoods were washed away. As dawn broke, those who survived looked out over a changed landscape. Where once the river had been a source of life and prosperity, now it raged unchecked, wild and dangerous. The shrine to Adana, which had stood for generations, was nowhere to be seen. In the aftermath, as the people of Umuaka struggled to rebuild, opinions were divided. Some, like Chidi, saw the disaster as a natural event, tragic but explainable by science. Others recognized it as the fulfillment of Eni's warnings, a punishment for their arrogance and disrespect. Eni herself was among those lost in the flood. But on the night after the disaster, many in the village dreamed of her. In their dreams, she stood at the river's edge, looking not at them but out across the water. "Remember," Dream Ene said, her voice carried on the wind. "Remember the power of the river." Now an old woman herself pleaded with the villagers to stop the construction. "Adana's patience wears thin," she warned. "If we continue on this path, her vengeance will be terrible." But Chidi and his supporters dismissed her concerns. "This is the 21st century," Chidi declared. "We can't let old superstitions hold us back from progress." The night before the dam was to be completed, a great storm arose. Rain lashed the village, and the river swelled to heights never before seen. As lightning split the sky, a massive wave rose up, taking the form of a woman, Adana, larger and more terrifying than ever before. "Foolish mortals," her voice boomed, shaking the very ground. "You dare to chain me, to pollute my waters with your machines? You have forgotten your promises, forsaken the respect you once showed. Now, you will remember why I am to be feared." With a gesture, Adana sent the wave crashing down upon the dam. Concrete crumbled like sand, and the river rushed through the breach, sweeping away everything in its path. The villagers fled to higher ground, watching in horror as their homes, their boats, their livelihoods were washed away. As dawn broke, those who survived looked out over a changed landscape. Where once the river had been a source of life and prosperity, now it raged unchecked, wild and dangerous. The shrine to Adana, which had stood for generations, was nowhere to be seen. In the aftermath, as the people of Umuaka struggled to rebuild, opinions were divided. Some, like Chidi, saw the disaster as a natural event, tragic but explainable by science. Others recognized it as the fulfillment of Ene's warnings, a punishment for their arrogance and disrespect. An herself was among those lost in the flood. But on the night after the disaster, many in the village dreamed of her. In their dreams, she stood at the river's edge, looking not at them but out across the water. "Remember," Dream Nen said, her voice carried on the wind. "Remember the power of the river. Remember the promise we made. It is not too late to make amends, to restore the balance. But if you forget again, if you take the river for granted, there will be no third chance." The people of Umuaka awoke from these dreams, shaken but determined. Led by the aging Dibia and those elders who remained, they began the slow process of rebuilding, not just their homes and livelihoods, but their relationship with the river and its spirit. New shrines were built, not just one grand structure, but many smaller ones dotting the riverbank. Offerings were made daily, and children were once again taught to respect and fear the water. Those who had supported Chidi's plans publicly renounced them, vowing to live in harmony with the river rather than trying to control it. Slowly, gradually, the river's rage seemed to subside. Fish returned to its waters, and the floods receded. But things never quite returned to the way they had been before. The river remained wilder, less predictable. Those who made their living from it learned to be more cautious, more respectful. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon was full, people would swear they saw a beautiful woman standing on the water's surface, watching the village with eyes that held both warning and sorrow. The tale of Emeka and Adana, of the village's prosperity and near destruction, became the stuff of legend. It spread beyond Umuwaka, told in whispers around campfires and passed down through families across the region. It served as a reminder of the old powers that still held sway in the world, and of the dangers of forgetting one's roots in the rush towards the future. In Umuwaka itself, life went on. Children were born, elders passed on, and the cycle of seasons turned. But always, always, there was the river, sometimes benevolent, sometimes dangerous, but ever present and ever powerful. And in every splash of water, every ripple on the surface, the people were reminded of Adana, the river bride, and the terrible price of betraying a spirit's trust. As for Emeka, some said his spirit still dwelled in the river's depths, forever bound to Adana as he had promised. Others claimed to have seen him on misty mornings, a spectral figure casting ghostly nets from a phantom canoe. But whether these were true sightings or merely stories told to frighten children, none could say for certain. What was certain was that the river held many secrets, and that the line between the world of humans and the realm of spirits was thinner than most people realized. In Umuwaka, every fisherman's cast, every child's splash, for they knew, in a way that outsiders never could, that the river was more than just water flowing to the sea. It was life and death, and power beyond mortal understanding. It was Adana's domain, and they were merely guests upon its banks. Guests who had learned, through joy and terror and loss, to never again take their host for granted.